All right, today I'm going to be cleaning and rebuilding the carburetors on a 1982 Kawasaki KZ1100. This is obviously got 4 carburetors here. I've got them pulled off the motorcycle already. I'm just going to go through it. I'm going to clean one of them for you as they're all the same, essentially inside, and they look identical except for some of the components on the outside, but for the most part, you'll get the idea. You'll know exactly how to clean these when we're done here. So first things first, that throttle cable is here, wraps around this arm here, pulls this up. So when you twist your throttle, what you're doing is opening these butterflies here, allowing more air to flow through. These are your carb sync screws right here. So you've got 3 of those. And then your 4th carburetor is adjusted with your cable there. When you twist that throttle, also what you're doing is sucking more air through your carburetor. When air hits this port here, it's going to pull that slide in that needle up. So if you were to grab compressed air right now and blow through this port here, this will slide up and then it should drop back down. If it doesn't drop down or it doesn't slide up, then you've got issues up top here with your diaphragm, potentially a spring issue. Maybe your slide is just stuck in your carburetor there. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to flip this carburetor up now at this time. You can disassemble these carburetors and separate them. I don't like doing that because most of the time you can clean them good enough without doing that, and that just adds a lot more work. There's going to be stuff like your choke assembly here that all kind of works together, and if you disassemble those, it's just going to add some more work for you. And I would not suggest doing that if you don't have a manual to see how exactly that goes back together. First thing you're going to want to do is grab a Phillips screwdriver, and you've got 4 screws here that you're going to pull off. And we've got those 4 screws loosened up now. The other thing I wanted to show you was on either side of these bowls here is a screw, a Phillips screw, or you can use a flat screwdriver, and you can loosen these up. If you turn these out, turn or two, fuel is going to start dumping out this bottom nipple here, and you can drain your carburetors doing that. I don't suggest using that method to actually clean your carburetor, as a lot of times people will do that thinking they are going to drain any debris that's in your carburetor out. Most of the time that doesn't drain or doesn't drain the debris out as much as just drain your fuel out. Possibly some of the smaller debris will dump out this bottom nipple here. But a lot of the stuff that's going to be lodged up into your jets are not going to come out by simply pulling this. So most of the time when you disassemble a carburetor to clean it, you've probably got stuff lodged into your jets, which is causing your motorcycle not to run right. You want to make sure that you clean this up really well with compressed air. You don't want any kind of debris or sand or pieces of rubber or anything inside this bowl here. As like I just said, you're going to give that motorcycle some throttle. You're going to suck that debris up through your jets there. So just keep that in mind. You want that bowl area completely clean. Next thing, we're going to pull our main jet there up top. And I like to use a larger flat screwdriver, and the reason is this jet isn't that big, but the thing is if you use too small of a flat screwdriver, say you use a small screwdriver like this and turn it in here, what you're doing is opening up this area here and going to allow more fuel up in this area, potentially going to round off this screw hole here and just cause some damage. So that's why I like to use a larger screwdriver, as long as it'll fit in there and you can securely lift that out. The other thing, you've got a brass washer underneath there. Make sure you've got that, and make sure that that goes underneath of that washer, or that jet. You've got a cap over top of your pilot jet area here, so you want to take and pull that. This should have a rubber seal that's good on there. And then you can take a small screwdriver. Even on this one here, I like to use a little bit bigger screwdriver. Grab a screwdriver, I take and wipe it off just to make sure you're not putting debris down in there. And then make sure it fits in there snug on that pilot jet, so that you are not, again, rounding that off and making it hard to pull that jet out there. Now once you get it loosened up like that, I take it and you can just dump it out like that. We've got your pilot jet right there. Most of the time, if your bike is hard starting or it doesn't idle well, most of the time it's because of this jet here. These pilot jets get plugged up because they are a very, very small orifice. You can take compressed air and blow through it. You can blow through it with your mouth. You do want to make sure that you can hold this up to light. Make sure you can see through it. If you can't see through this pilot jet here, you're going to want to take a small strand of wire to run it through there. Just try to clean it out. You can get jet cleaners, but the problem is on these pilot jets, the orifice is so small. A lot of times the jet cleaners that you would buy from, say, K&L or Moose or a specialty tool company, a lot of times those jets cleaners aren't small enough to fit through these. So I like to you can take a small strand of wire, say, I just pulled one out of a winch, just a small piece of wire, and I like to try to run that through there and clean it out. Soak it with Carb&Choke cleaner. If you're not getting through it, these jets are extremely cheap. You can just go and replace those. They're also different sizes. This one is 37.5. If you're needing more fuel at idle or at up to a quarter throttle, you can actually get these bigger, and it would allow more fuel to be pulled through there. You would only want to do that if the riding altitude is going to be different from what you're typically riding at, or if you've got performance stuff done to the motorcycle. That is when you're going to start changing out jet sizes. Don't just change it out because you want a faster idle. That's not going to solve your problem there. Now we're going to take and pull this pin out that hold this float on here. What I've had to do here is grab a pick, and I set it on the end there. I take and just lightly tap on the end here to push this out. Sometimes these are a little bit of a chore pulling these out of here. Sometimes they stick, and the problem is these are aluminum posts here and this one here, and if you tap and put too much pressure on these posts, you'll just break these off. So you want to make sure that you're being really careful with how you tap on them. Also, be really careful when you go to pull these out. So now I'm going to take in a pair of side dikes and just kind of slowly taking and pulling it out. And you don't want to damage that area. Even with your side dikes, just be careful when you grab a hold of it there that you don't ding this up too much, because what that's doing is the next time you take it to put that pin back in, it's gonna be difficult because you're gonna have to go through these same posts here with a damaged pin. So as soon as you get it far enough out, you can actually just take your float off like that and just lift it straight up. Your needle's gonna stay down in there, and sometimes I'll take a pair of small pliers like this, or you can just take and flip that carburetor upside down. That needle will drop out. You want to inspect this needle really well, make sure there's no grooving on here, make sure that tip is in good condition. What that does is when that fuel comes into the bottom of your carburetor there, or it comes into your carburetor here on this port, it runs through this rail that runs all along here, if you can see that, and will go and dump into these ports here. So this needle will shut that fuel off. If that needle is damaged at all, if there's debris that's stuck in there, it'll cause that needle to stay open, allowing more fuel to dump in. When more fuel dumps in, it's either going to go out your overflow. If your overflow is plugged, it's going to go straight into your motor, which isn't good. So you want to make sure that these needles are shutting off. That's what happens when your bike is on a trailer or on the back of a pickup. A lot of times these needles are bouncing around, causing your float to bounce around, allowing more fuel to flow into your carburetor, and will a lot of times dump onto the back of your pickup or on your trailer, and you'll see some fuel underneath there. Sometimes exact same thing will happen when you put your bike on your center stand or your kickstand. That fuel is just sloshing around there. It's not uncommon. You actually want that fuel to dump out the bottom nipple of these carburetors as opposed to dumping into your motor there. Now the other thing, if these needles and the seat need replaced here, you can, a lot of times we'll get those in a jet kit. You can take then Phillips screwdriver and unscrew this. And there's your holder there. Now you can take a pair of pliers and just pull that this seat out. And you also want to do that when you're cleaning the carburetors to clean out this screen here. There's a screen that'll hopefully help keep any kind of debris that's in that fuel tank or in this fuel line here. A lot of times that screen right there will keep that debris from dumping into the bottom bowl of your carburetor here. So put that back in, make sure that that O-ring is good on that seat there. Some people will call that a needle valve also. So keep that in mind when it comes to ordering parts. So snug that back up there. We'll take and drop our needle down in there. Now these floats are adjustable, and if you've got fuel that just out of one carburetor sometimes will drip more than the other ones when it's just sitting there in the shop, you can take and adjust this needle, this metal tab here just slightly, and in this position you want to push it down to cause that fuel to shut off sooner. Now you want to be really careful when you're doing that. You don't go too far, and you want to take a measurement, and that your manual will have the measurement on what that needs to be for your float height, so that you're not shutting that fuel off too much. If you shut that fuel off too much, you're going to cause a lean cylinder, your bike to be running lean. So keep that in mind. I'm going to take now and I'm going to push that pin in there, and remember how difficult it was to come out, so you're going to have probably some difficulty going back in. You want to make sure that float is lined up there when you're starting to go back in. If it's not, you're obviously not gonna, that pin's not gonna go through as easy. So you should just be able to push it in most of the way. And then once you get it in far enough, those should be almost flush there, and you should almost, this should almost be sticking out the other side, which is right where it needs to be, and you can go back together. Next, you'll put your main jet back in. This main jet also has a size on it, and depending on riding conditions, altitude, performance done to the motorcycle, you can swap out this main jet. Don't forget your brass washer underneath of that main jet there. Again, take a screwdriver and snug that up. Once we get that snugged up, then we can take our pilot jet. Make sure that this whole process, you're blowing through this with compressed air. You can even, when you pull that needle and seat out of there, you can even blow through your main tube here with compressed air, Carb&Choke cleaner, and you want to make sure that all these ports are free and clear of any kind of debris. So once you get those cleaned out, you take your pilot jet, drop it down in there, and tighten that up. These are brass jets, so you don't have to really crank on these. Otherwise, you're just going to a lot of times round off the top. And then take your cap there, make sure that O-ring is good, and then shove that down into place there. Now we can take, as long as your bowl here is cleaned out, make sure your O-ring or your gasket around the outside here is good. Then we'll take and put this bowl back on there. We're going to take our 4 Phillips screws there and snug those down. Now before I flip this carburetor over, here's your idle adjust here. When you turn it clockwise in, you're turning your idle up. And what that's doing is putting pressure on this arm here, opening those butterflies slightly. So when you turn that idle screw in, it's going to turn your idle up. When you turn that idle screw out, which would be counterclockwise, you're going to lower your idle. Also on this side, you've got your choke plungers here, 1 for each carburetor. And you take, and these should run smoothly all together. They should shift back and forth. And there should be a couple different spots that will actually sit and hold that choke open. So you can see it there and probably hear it there, it opening and shutting. And each time it gets to one of these grooves right here, it should hold itself open and in this position all the way shut. So you want to make sure that those are working properly. You can pull those out. It's fairly easy to do that. You can pull these out. It's fairly easy to do that. Just slide this open there. You can unscrew these. They're 14 millimeters and pull those out there. Up here is going to be your air fuel screw up top here. And you take and turn these. These are all adjusted from completely seated position and how many turns out. So your manual may say 2.5 turns, or may say just 2.5. What that's doing is you run that air fuel screw all the way in, and then you run it out as many turns as your manual says. Got that air fuel screw all the way down. Now you take, and depending on what your manual says, also again, riding conditions, stuff like that, take into account. Take and you'll screw that, count the number of screws out on that turn. So this time, do a half turn, 1 1/2, 2 turns. And that's your air fuel screw adjustment there. Now we'll take and we'll go through your top cap here and see what's underneath of there. 4 Phillips screws to pull this cap off of here. What I like to do is take my thumb and put it on top here and hold that cap in place. And we will start removing those screws. Keeping my thumb on the cap there. There is a spring underneath of here, and parts aren't going to go flying everywhere, but I do like to make sure that I know position of everything when I pull this cap. And if this diaphragm is folded over, I can see that when I pull this cap. So pull that cap, there'll be a groove right here for your spring. That spring will just pop right out of there. Set those aside, clean it up. If there's any debris in those, you can clean that up really well. Take my finger then, push that slide up, and there is your slide there along with your needle. So when that spring is out of there, you've got a plastic keeper there that holds that needle in, but you are able just to push that up just like I did there when that spring isn't holding that needle in. So keep that in mind so you don't lose those parts there. If you take and just flip that upside down, this plastic holder here is going to go flying, and your needle here. And this needle here has a clip on it. There's also different sizes. Sometimes these needles are adjustable, so this clip would determine where you need to be at. This one is not adjustable, but there is a size engraved on it, so you can adjust those that way. Just order different sizes. Going back together, what I like to do is take and fold that down. Make sure you inspect this diaphragm really well. The groove on this diaphragm is going to line up with the groove on this carburetor here. I'm going to take and drop that needle in. Make sure that that goes into the correct hole. There's 2 different holes in here. You want to make sure it's on the center one. Drop your spacer down. Make sure that's seated properly. Again, make sure that groove falls in the right place. And you saw what I did there. Turn that diaphragm down, and I'll show you why I did that. When I'll take my finger then and slide it underneath of there so that our diaphragm stays in that position. Take our spring, put it in there, take our cap, set it in there, put that groove right around that spring there, and slide that in. Still have my finger underneath of there, and now I'm going to put pressure on this top cap here. So while I'm putting these back in, you do want to make sure that you clean out this entire area with Carb&Choke Clean. I don't like to spray that diaphragm with Carb&Choke cleaner. Try not to get any kind of fuel or chemicals on that. A lot of times that'll dry it out. Sometimes that'll cause it to expand or shrink, and then it just makes it a lot more difficult to get that diaphragm into position there. You want to make sure it's completely seated, and that's the reason why we keep our thumb on top here, is because if we let go of this top cap here, our diaphragm could potentially drop down, and you would either pinch it or you would rip it when you put this cap on, or it just may not function properly. So snug this up. I still have my finger underneath here holding the slide and the needle up, and then I still have my thumb on top until I get these snugged up. Now we'll take, and you can see there, this slide will go up and down like it should. Make sure all of them do that. Again, you can take compressed air. You can just go right along here, blow a small amount of compressed air through these ports here to make sure that airflow is properly causing these slides to go up and down. Make sure they go down freely. So this is the Carb Clean on a 1982 Kawasaki 1100. If you've got questions on this machine, make sure to leave those in the comments below. If you found this video helpful, make sure you like and subscribe to my channel.